Now approaching their third week of airstrikes, NATO say they have plenty more targets to go for. Their hope is that the Bosnian Serbs will remove their guns before NATO resorts to the so-called Option 3, strategic targets such as airfields, factories or barracks.
I think that there will come a time when the Bosnian Serbs will realise that, first of all, the alliance and the UN are serious and that we're not going to back down. And secondly, they will have to calculate simply how much military pressure of damage they can continue to soak up. And I think there will come a break point when they will realise that it's in their interest to remove their weapons from around Sarajevo.
In Washington, there's confidence that the Bosnian Serbs are becoming ever more vulnerable to airstrikes.
Command and control has been dramatically, I can't put a percentage on it, but it's been dramatically impeded. A good many of their ammunition dumps have been destroyed, some significant percentage of them. So there has been a very substantial impact.
But NATO cannot ignore the mounting protests from Russia that it's been sidelined. A group of Russian deputies left for Serb-held Bosnia today. Not a dramatic step, more a gesture of Slav solidarity, but also a warning that Russia's continued participation in the contact group's peace initiative cannot be taken for granted. To placate the Russians, America's special envoy Strobe Talbot is to go to Moscow for talks, while America's main peace negotiator, Richard Holbrooke, will go to Belgrade to consolidate last Friday's first steps to a settlement reached at Geneva. NATO's commanders are clearly feeling the pressure to deliver the Bosnian Serbs. Speaking on ABC's Nightline, Admiral Leighton Smith called for a demonstration of intent from General Mladic.
What I would prefer to see is a written guarantee by the Bosnian Serb army, specifically General Mladic, and we would like to see demonstration of intent, and that is to say they're moving weapons out of the 20-kilometer exclusion zone. Clearly, if we see that, and they have demonstrated intent, and they've signed up, and they've told us that they will comply with the other requirements, then I must tell you that my expectations would be that there would be a good reason there to stop the bombing.
The Serbs are also under pressure on the battlefield, giving ground to the Croats in central Bosnia and fighting hard around Gorazde. But overall, the question remains, is NATO determined enough to inflict the level of damage to the Serbs which will finally bend them to NATO's will? Jim Fish, BBC News.
I'm joined now on the line from Sarajevo by the UN spokesman there, Chris Vernon. Chris Vernon, can you tell us first about the gains that appear to have been made on the battlefield in recent days and hours? What's the situation? What ground have the Serbs lost?
Well, the Bosnian army has taken a small piece of ground called the Ozren salient in northern Bosnia, which is about 10 kilometers by 5 kilometers. We do not believe that was really contested by the Bosnian Serbs and may have been a tactical withdrawal on their part. On the southern confrontation line, we believe that Donji Vakuf, a town that the Bosnians have been trying to take for 6 or 7 weeks now, has now also gone into Bosnian hands. What we are not clear about, we have no presence on the ground and no ability to really ascertain what is happening, is the Croatian army and the Bosnian Croat offensive up near the Livno Valley, Sipovo area. We just cannot confirm anything on that.
Now, it's fair to say, isn't it, that if
they might not quite be the greatest there. I mean, you only need to look at the goal they conceded an injury time on the 90th minute at Blackburn to see they've got 1 or 2 problems in that department. That wouldn't have happened with some of the great Leeds United or Liverpool sides that were very, very professional. 1 each. They've got a point from the game. They're still attacking and they get beaten the counter-attack with a 90th minute goal through poor defending.
So, Gordon, would it give you a good feeling if your current team, Middlesbrough, got 1 over on your old team?
Yeah, well, obviously I was at Manchester United for a long while and I've got a strong affection for the club, and I would love them to win the championship, and I think they will. But I'm hoping it's all over by the time they come to Middlesbrough. They might not be trying too hard and we'll get the 3 points anyway.
That would take the problem away from you.
Yes.
Gordon, thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Pleasure.
Malcolm, you referred to this earlier on about the Newcastle style. It's been praised as being a great attacking style. But it's also been said that with that attacking style comes a kind of kamikaze approach as well, that it leaves you vulnerable in the defence as you pour everybody up front. Somebody just comes up and knocks a goal in, knocks a ball in the back of the net.
Yeah, kamikaze is an interesting word to use, and I'd throw another one back at you. It's all very well to have a kamikaze approach, but you're always going to finish up getting killed off, and that's what has happened in the past, and I hope that just for these last 3 games that Newcastle United will be able to change that kind of approach. Allow those who have a cavalier spirit to be cavalier, the Ferdinands and the Esprilas and the Ginolas, but everybody else behind, they've got to stay totally organised. And as Gordon McQueen made a very strong point, which is that the professional sides, when you've got something to hang on to, you make sure you hang on to it, but you do it from defence, not from the forward line.
Right, okay. We've had some email from Gary Silver in Manchester. He says Manchester United are by far the greatest team the world has ever seen. Well, maybe he's not been to Juventus or Milan or Glasgow. We are now guaranteed the double as we've won the toss yesterday and we'll now wear out the red shirts at Wembley. None of these dodgy grey shirts. But of course, Alan, Manchester United were in exactly the same position last year. You looked like you were heading for the double and ended up with neither.
That's right. You know, the West Ham game, had they won that, it was all over. I think it's very, you know, there's a few tricky games still to come. There's no doubt about it. Forest, they could, really could be the spanner in the works. And even Gordon McQueen's old club, Leeds United tonight, I honestly don't expect them to go there and get beat 3 or 4-0. I think Newcastle's form at home is fantastic, and I expect them to win, beat Southampton tonight.
Right.
And it's just, it could honestly go down to the last game of the season. And Tottenham are a funny old side, and Newcastle at home against Tottenham, who knows? But United know what they've got to do. They've got to win all the games, and they'll be champs. But I do feel sorry a little bit for Newcastle because I think they've thoroughly entertained crowds up and down the country, and I think Ginola is a wonderful player.
All right, let's see what Robert Baker's got to say. He's on the line from London. Robert?
Good afternoon. I would just like to ask Malcolm how Malcolm would feel if Newcastle don't win the title after Kevin Keegan has spent so much money on his team.
I would be disappointed for them because I feel more than anybody it's the supporters of Newcastle who really do deserve a title after more than, I think it's more than 60 years now since they've had that wonderful experience. And they have supported the club through thick and thin. They are the most incredible supporters at supporting failure, and it would just be so lovely for them all to be rewarded. But nevertheless, Alan is talking of a rebuilding programme, all the youth coming through at Old Trafford at Man United, and I have to say that probably it's one of the best youth programmes.
Killing civilians in its air raids. The NATO operations chiefs have for the past 2 weeks been following their Option 2 plan, attacking Bosnian Serb facilities, supporting military operations, targeting munitions factories, storage depots, air defence, radar communications and ammunition supply routes. NATO claims that pilots would abort their missions if these targets were close to people's homes. But if NATO decided to escalate raids under its Option 3 plan, the pilots might be involved in attacking facilities close to civilian areas. These include power stations, airports and airfields, Serb headquarters buildings, and Serb political and military leadership targets. These targets would be much more likely to involve civilian casualties. As the US envoy Strobe Talbot heads for talks in Moscow, a delegation of Russian deputies is going to the Bosnian Serb stronghold of Pale in a gesture of solidarity. Our correspondent Martin Sixsmith reports now from Moscow on the mounting Russian anger over NATO's policy in Bosnia.
The parliamentarians are flying to Bosnia this morning, not to further the peace process, but to show Russia's support for the Serbs in the face of what they regard as a rampant NATO war machine. In the Russian parliament, passions have flared over Bosnia. Ultranationalist MPs have attacked and bullied those they regard as lacking in commitment to the pro-Serb, anti-NATO cause. The leader of today's delegation says the West must be taught not to ignore Russia's views.
The West is making a big mistake. It's trying to drive the Serbs and us into a corner. The Serbs with bombardment and the Russians by ignoring our views. We're a nuclear power and the world should remember that.
While most ordinary Russians have little interest in Bosnia, the nationalists have made support for Serbia a test of Russian virility. And with elections pending, all politicians, including Boris Yeltsin, are vying to prove their patriotic and anti-Western credentials. Having criticised NATO for becoming a participant in the war instead of a neutral peacekeeper, the Russian parliament is now urging the Kremlin to do the same. Almost all the members of today's delegation are in favour of providing the Serbs with military equipment, a move that would effectively create a war by proxy between Russia and the Western alliance. Martin Sixsmith, BBC News, Moscow.
Well, as we've heard, the US mediator and Assistant Secretary of State Richard Holbrooke is returning once more to Belgrade to meet President Milošević of Serbia. The president is considered central to hopes of an eventual peace settlement. Joining me now to look at the role that he has played is Paul Adams, who is a former BBC correspondent in Belgrade. Paul, let's look first of all at what Mr. Holbrooke hopes to get out of this visit to Belgrade.
I think what he's looking to do is to try and build on the progress that was made in Geneva last week. Even though there was an agreement on basic principles in Bosnia, a lot of the people involved were very dissatisfied that they had not overcome many of the other obstacles that remain. They're looking, for example, at the question of Eastern Slavonia, the last remaining Serb-held area in Croatia, an area that has to be resolved if we are to see some grand mutual recognition among the states of the former Yugoslavia. I think that will be top of the agenda.
But the agenda is not that hasn't been altered by anything new that can be offered by the American side or given by Milošević.
No, I don't think so. I mean, the basic package looming behind all this is one whereby this recognition takes place, whereby Yugoslavia recognizes Bosnia and Croatia within their existing borders, and then sanctions are lifted against the rump Yugoslavia, Serbia and Montenegro. This is something that President Milošević is still very anxious to see. He knows that his economy is still in very dire straits and that perhaps another winter could bring more hardship, so this is key to him as well.
He is the key to all of this, isn't he, or to an awful lot of it. And yet, right at the beginning, many saw him as a nationalist, whipping up the tensions, the passions that have led us down this road.
That's right. I mean, he first came to prominence at a time when, as we see here, he was responsible for, as you say, whipping up Serb nationalist passions. He made a number of key speeches, this one in 1989 at the 600th anniversary of a famous battle in Serbian history. This was very much Milošević, the nationalist, Milošević fueling this fire that eventually consumed the entire country, and it began in Serbia and with him.
And yet, since then, and everyone thinking that he was pulling all the strings, he has actually suffered rebuffs, hasn't he, at the hands of the nationalists, the Bosnian Serb nationalists, who in a sense he unleashed.
Absolutely, and we saw particularly, we've seen in the last couple of years, in fact, episodes where he has attempted to persuade the Bosnian Serbs that the time had come to sue for peace. He, in a very celebrated attempt, went to the Bosnian Serb headquarters in Pale. He told them that the time had come to accept the Vance-Owen plan. They rebuffed him. They said they wanted nothing to do with it. It was a humiliation for him. And since then, the divisions that we all hear about between President Milošević and Radovan Karadzic have emerged.
All right, in that case, what game is he playing now?
Now, I think his objective is to deliver the Bosnian Serbs, with or without Radovan Karadzic, preferably without, because he sees Karadzic as a rival, a true nationalist, if you like, someone he can do well without, and be rewarded as the man who delivered peace in the Balkans and, as a result, gets sanctions lifted against his own country, and then can get on with the business of leading the Serbs in Serbia and possibly also in Bosnia.
Well, Adams, thank you very much indeed. Now we're going to take a break. When we come back, there will be a full roundup of the world's business news. Stay with us.
Discover a new way of finding out what's happening in the world and why, with news and analysis on the hour, every hour, from the largest news-gathering operation on Earth, BBC World. 3 distinctive news programs for Europe. Newsday, NewsDesk and The World Today go beyond the headline stories with in-depth interviews from presenters with the experience to get to the truth.
Let's just pin it down to the incidents of the last 24 hours, if we may.
There are global business updates, worldwide weather and sport. Current affairs programs and documentaries keep you up to date with a rapidly changing world, and science, technology and leisure programs keep you informed as well as entertained.
Stylish and fast, very fast.
BBC World, in depth, in focus, informed. If you'd like to receive BBC World, call this number or contact your cable operator or satellite dealer now.
Welcome back, I'm Justin Webb. Today's main stories. New fighting in Bosnia. Big advances are reported by the Bosnian Muslim and Croat forces against the Serbs in central and western Bosnia. But diplomatic moves continue. The American Special Envoy, Richard Holbrooke, is due in Belgrade today. And in Sri Lanka, a military transport plane crashes into the sea. About 80 on board are feared dead. Time for us to have a look at the business news now with Peter Morgan. Peter.
Thanks, Justin. And the dollar has continued to strengthen against the yen, reaching levels it hasn't seen for more than a year. It's welcome news to the Japanese government and to Japanese exporters who spent the summer struggling to overcome the strength of their currency. At the moment, the dollar is trading at 102 yen 60, and the Nikkei index closed much higher, 142 points up. In the UK, unemployment figures for August show that the number of people out of work fell by 18,000. Labour costs are down too, adding to evidence that interest rates have now peaked. The 100-share index is at the moment 24.2 up, and the pound is buying $1.55 or 2 Deutschmarks and 30 Pfennigs. Not to be left out of the stock market rallies in the Far East and in Europe, America's stock market is ended its last session at a record high. Wall Street will open for business in a few hours' time at 47.47. Now a brief look at some of the other business stories happening around the world today. Two top US car makers, Ford and General Motors, are cutting production for the rest of 1995, despite strong August sales. Analysts say the move will contribute to lower profits in the last half of the year, but they say the companies would prefer to err on the side of caution rather than risk being left with excess stock. Drought in Bangladesh has caused a sharp decline in the country's tea harvest. Production of the crop has fallen 22% since January compared to a year before. Tea is one of Bangladesh's principal exports. The economy of Panama is on its way to joining the North American Free Trade Agreement, according to the country's president, Ernesto Perez Bayaderas. He said joining NAFTA was of critical importance to the development of the economy and that it would promote investment and increase employment. Chile is expected to be the first South American country to join the United States, Canada and Mexico in the trade bloc. That's all the business news for now, so back to Justin.
Thanks very much, Peter, for some profound thoughts now on our century. We're reaching the end of a century. In some ways the best and in some ways the worst century that mankind has seen. It is a century that's seen new levels of prosperity for many, but new levels of misery as well. The BBC has produced a documentary series which looks at the people's century through the testimony of the ordinary individuals around the world who have lived it.
The People's Century tells the story of the last 100 years through the first-hand accounts of eyewitnesses. In 26 episodes, they describe the defining political and social changes.
The boss used to thrash us. He used to beat us women up a lot, as if we were children.
This woman is now 114. She remembers her treatment by a Boer farmer in South Africa at the turn of the century. She was found by a local researcher who scoured the township of Soweto, asking for the oldest person who lived there. Rare film footage was also painstakingly tracked down.
It is a detective hunt, and you know, some things are more difficult to find than others. I had great difficulty finding film of South Africa, black South African life. There wasn't much in this country, nothing in South Africa, and I found some in Holland.
The quality of much of the archive film has surprised the series makers. This scene in France was filmed in colour in 1912, some of the earliest colour footage ever found. The century's cultural and social life plays a big part in the series.
The little choo-choo train that takes me